Hey everybody, Kenny here. So I was just in the process of editing a video for Grand Guilds, and while I was working on it, I got to thinking about something, and I decided that this topic should take priority over just showcasing this game. So for now, I'm just going to be cycling through game footage that is unrelated to what I'm talking about. I just want to talk about the rule of 3 for RPGs. Now, some of you may be aware of the rule of 3. Not in particular for RPGs, but in general for the restaurant experience. So, kind of a common idiom, I guess, that people use is that if you want good food fast, it's not going to be cheap. You want fast food cheap, it's not going to be good. If you want fast food that is also good, it's not going to be fast. It's a nice little triangle of expectations, I suppose. And I feel it very much relates to enjoyment as far as RPGs go. Now, what I mean there is when you're playing an RPG, most likely there are factors in play that will determine whether or not you're going to enjoy the game that sit outside the realm of general quality. Because a game can have the best writers, it can include the best systems, and it can be an overall amazing experience. But sometimes there are a conflux of these things that simply work against the enjoyment experience of RPG. The way I like to put it, generally, if an RPG is long with a lot of intricate systems, then even if the story is bad, overall it'll most likely be a very good game. However, if an RPG is long and has a really good story, but the systems aren't all that interesting, then you may still enjoy the game, but a game that has better story than gameplay generally won't cut mustard if it's also very long. And the same goes for if it's a short game with a bad story and very shallow mechanics, then you're probably not going to like it. Because, sure, I respected your time by not being particularly long, but if you didn't enjoy the story and the systems were just complicated enough that you didn't even have time to really learn to exploit them by the time you reach the end, then what was even really the point, right? So you kind of want a nice balance with RPGs in particular, because why play a game that's going to consume your time if you aren't getting the best experience possible, right? And the reason this came to me while I was making my Grand Guilds video is that Grand Guilds, I feel, goes solidly in the realm of short and sweet with systems that aren't too deep to contend with, which I feel is probably the best category for RPGs. While I personally am a systems guy and I prefer for my games to be as deep as possible, if a game's length is short, then I want the story to be what keeps me going. Because if the systems are really good, then they're going to disappoint me by the end because I'm just not going to have had enough time to spend with them, right? So you'd rather have a short game that has a really good story and just, passable gameplay. Gameplay that wasn't offensive, wasn't grandiose or fantastic. It could be. If the gameplay is great, then awesome. But you can get by with a game being mediocre in terms of gameplay if it was a short experience that you were able to enjoy through the story, because it respected your time and it was overall fun, right? And that's because I feel that the game Grand Guilds manages to strike the good balance, whereas a game like Triangle Strategy is in the wrong side of the pool. Triangle Strategy is a very good-looking game. It has a very deep and involved storyline, but its gameplay systems are trash. I know that's a very offensive thing to say, but if you've played Triangle Strategy, you know that as far as a tactical RPG goes, it's solid. It does nothing wrong as far as being a tactical RPG. But for the length of that game, those systems are pitiful. You have these little skill trees that each character has, and the way you progress these skill trees is you have to collect items from killing enemies, but you don't really get a lot of these materials from just playing the game, so you need to grind pointlessly from camp menu just to accrue enough of these resources to be able to upgrade your characters, which ultimately doesn't even matter in that game. So it's just really long, and you never feel like your characters are ever really improving. And don't get me wrong, if you really like games for the story, then you'll probably still like Triangle Strategy. If you like tactical combat, like Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Ogre, Skya, the combat is still pretty good. It's just that you spend so much more time with the story in that game than you do with the combat. Then when you are doing the combat, the majority of the time you're going to be spending with it is grinding, and not good grinding, bad kind of grinding. It's just an experience that bogs the game down so greatly that I'd rather that have been like a visual novel and didn't have the tactical elements at all. Just make it a visual novel, and the parts where you're in control of the characters, instead of these leading to battles, make it that it's like a kingdom builder or something like that. It would make much more sense in that fashion, because that game is just so core bent by that story, and you have this morality system to determine how good your ending is going to be, but you feel like the combat is completely displaced in that what's that word, in that paradigm, I guess. Just doesn't work. Once again, the combat is well done. The units have skills that work and look great. Nothing that any of the characters do you could say, oh, that's a bad use of development time, or a poor implementation of this or that. You can't say anything like that about the characters or the abilities. It's just that it doesn't feel good. The game doesn't feel good to play, because you literally go through 2 hours of story, then you do one battle, and then that's the end of that chapter, and you move on to the next 2 hours of story. So the battles kind of start to feel like they're just there to keep you awake instead of to add anything to the game. Because the reason it's Triangle Strategy is because you have to choose between these different alignments. You have to make choices that put you in different alignments, and these characters are so well written that you want to do these events that help you edge the balance towards whatever outcome you want. You want to learn about these things that are happening. So it's very well written, and it's a very good game in that regard, but the tactical roleplay gameplay just ruins the entire experience. Now, if it was a very deep tactical gameplay like Final Fantasy Tactics, where there was a job system, and you could feel like every time you're going into battle that your characters are improving in some way that is meaningful, that makes grinding feel like something you want to do because you're adding something to the game, other than having to grind just so you can gain these abilities from the skill tree that look like they're going to add something to the game, but ultimately don't. Because honestly, when you grind in that game, your characters get so strong from the little bit of progression you do with them. They get so strong that you start to wonder what the point of the combat is at all. It's I only did enough grinding to be able to unlock this one little upgrade for each of these characters' weapons, and now I'm just annihilating all of the story missions. And I it's not like I grinded 10 levels or anything, or I upgraded anything significantly, but somehow this little bit just to get these little upgrades, these little incremental upgrades, somehow improve my character in ways that make the combat progression feel completely one-sided. Like, oh, if I didn't do that, then I would be getting destroyed by every encounter I went through. But because I did the little bit of grinding, now I'm the destructive force, and there's no tactical balance to even things out and make it feel like you're being challenged by the game. Because either you're getting completely wrecked or you're completely wrecking. There's no in between. It's very weird for a tactical RPG. Yeah, I know this has become like mostly a rant about triangle strategy, but I was very disappointed by that game because it was a game that I was really looking forward to. I loved Octopath Traveler. You know, I've loved all of the Final Fantasy Tactics games. I loved Tactics Ogre. You know, my most viewed, well, my technically most viewed video is about a tactical RPG. And it's just something that I'm very passionate about just because I want people to enjoy games. I want people to want to play games. I want people to play RPGs and love the same games that I've come to love over the years. Not for my benefit, but for their own, because I feel that RPGs really do add wealth to your life. And as far as enjoyment goes, like you're able to say, oh, I really feel like I accomplished something when I played through Final Fantasy VII, or I really felt that I received such an emotional investment from getting to the theater in Final Fantasy VI, or I love the family dynamic of Final Fantasy of Dragon Quest V. I can't believe I figured out this thing that kind of broke the game but was still awesome in Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Like there's so much to love about RPGs, and when they're done right, they're done amazing. But then there's instances of games like Xenosaga 2, where sure, like a big reason why people don't like that game is that the story just wasn't great. It definitely wasn't anywhere near as good as the story from Xenosaga or Xenosaga 3. But I feel that like the big thing is that even though it's definitely the shortest of those 3 games, it's still way too long for the story you get. Like it's a very long game where you're just doing kind of a lot of filler for no reason. And that sucks. Like, Xenosaga 2, along with being the game with the worst story in that franchise, is also the game with probably the weakest systems in that franchise. Because it introduced some stuff to try to improve on the combat, but it kind of did it in the way Tales of Legendia tried to improve on combat of the Tales series, where like you have this like kind of new mechanic that was added to an already established system. Then it only comes into play at certain times, and it's not something that you feel like you're exploiting throughout the game. It's not something that you feel that you're improving. That's improving your experience as you play. Very weird. I mean, honestly, I feel that that game exists to introduce Jin, and that's it. That was the purpose that entire game served, to be like, oh yeah, so in the first game, Jin sent Xian an email, and we wanted people to know that that was her brother and not some weird cross tie-in thing with Tekken. Because like it feels like like that was the purpose that game served, was just to go, yeah, this is an actual character, not some weird thing that we didn't bother to explain throughout the entire first game. Yeah, so it's something I think is good to consider. What do you value? What's your triangle? Like, do you weigh game length as high as you do your systems, your story? Do you prioritize systems over story? Do you prioritize story over systems? What is the factor that to you makes a great RPG? And it also works to define RPGs that you don't like. Because once again, I'm not saying triangle strategy is bad. You know, it looks great, combat's good, story's really good. No, I really like I've forgotten the name. The scale thing. There's a scale. You know, people vote. They put their coin thing on the scale. That determines how decisions are made in that game. But it's actually like a really good system. That's why I'm saying that, like, you know, it kind of feels that, like, you know, like the game wasn't meant to be a tactical strategy game. It was meant to be some kind of like kingdom builder, and then told him, oh, you made Octopath Traveler, so you got to do something. And okay, and who knows? Maybe that's not the case. Maybe they actually did make that game with intention of it being a tactical role-playing game. And then as they were making it, they just got really into the characters and the world they were building, and decided to just, you know, go full force on that. And that's why there's so much more effort put into that than there is into the rest of the game. Anyways, I just wanted to post this discussion topic. So anyone who's like passionate about RPGs like I am, you know, I want people to think about that. You know, why do you love it, and why do you hate some of your RPGs? What is the thing that drives you to feel your passion, whether good or bad? Just as something to think about throughout the day. I know I do. Anyways, that's it for me. Hope you have a great day. Bye.